people who are still outside, and I'll have a little intro that might also give the chance for other audience to join. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Safe Environment Panel. My name is Attila Uras. I'm the head of Response and Recovery Unit in UNEP, and part of the UNEP Ukraine team, I consider myself. I have to say, I was the first one deployed in June 2022 here, and so it's good to be back and start discussing green recovery, considering those days we were still trying to understand what the impacts would be. And it's no secret, we all know that the war had a devastating impact, and usually the first impact noticed is always pollution in different means. The impact is not only on people, it's on infrastructure and also on the environment. It's becoming a bit of a cliche, but I have to say that the environment has been a silent and often invisible victim of the war. We know ecosystems have been disrupted, land and water have been highly contaminated, polluted, and critical natural resources have suffered severe degradation. And we talk about green recovery now, and green recovery will offer Ukraine a good opportunity to restore those damaged landscapes. We were talking about it in the previous session, protect public health, and rebuild a more resilient and environmentally sound future. This morning in the opening remarks, we heard from Deputy Minister Danyuk this morning. She was talking about green recovery is a transition to a new and better quality of life. I think this was a very good definition, because when we describe quality of life, it comes with easy access to a healthy environment, a healthier public, and a cleaner water, cleaner air. In fact, it was even one of the definitions of sustainable development after the Brundtland report, which was referring to the carrying capacity of ecosystems that maintains good quality of humans. So now we are here with a diverse group of experts. We will try to identify some priorities. We'll try to answer questions on what environmental issues need urgent attention, where can we act immediately, and where do we need longer-term strategies. And the panel today is bringing together experts from different, I would call, complementary sectors, with different perspectives. We will try to have like a picture of the whole issue. And we will, thanks to their experiences, we will start maybe answering some of these questions. But we know that today's meeting is not going to come with solutions, but it will provide a valuable starting point, perhaps. There will not be the final answers, but the foundation will allow for more focused meetings following this kickoff forum, I would call. So I look forward to rich, constructive dialogue here, and thanks in advance for giving the time and being here with us. We have a very, as I said, rich list of panelists. We have the privilege of having Mr. Alexander Semenets, the Deputy Minister of Environment Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. We have Colonel Yuri Sitnik, Head of the Environmental Safety Department of the Main Directorate of Mine Action from Ministry of Defense. We have Mr. Ivan Moisienko, Professor, Doctor of Biological Sciences with us. We have Mr. Harri Pietarila from Finnish Meteorological Institute with us. And we will have two online panelists. One, Mr. Anatoly Pavelko. He is the leading legal advisor at the NGO Bureau of Environmental Investigations. And my colleague will join from Nairobi, Alex Pires, who is the wastewater team leader and at the Source to Sea Pollution Unit under the Marine and Freshwater Branch, and he's going to connect from Nairobi. So we have, in fact, originally a list of questions, but we decided that also considering the time, which is the challenge we have in front of us, we'd like to start with the question of what are the priority issues, in your opinion, need to be addressed to achieve a safe environment in the context of Ukraine's green recovery. And I would like to start with Deputy Minister Semenets for his intervention, please. Microphone is yours.
Доброго дня.
Good day.
Доброго дня, колеги.
Good day, dear colleagues. First and foremost, I welcome all of the participants of the first forum of the Platform for Action on the Green Recovery of Ukraine. As it was properly mentioned by Mr. Attila, our moderator today, as of now we are in such a point of time when the combats and unprovoked aggression of Russian Federation damages a lot our environment. And that is why this kind of platform, the platform of the first Forum for Action on the Green Recovery of Ukraine, where we have the representatives of the state, of businesses, academia, and civil society, international partners, it has to provide this synergy which will allow to hear each other and to develop certain proper solutions on the way to the green recovery of Ukraine. That is why interaction between all of the stakeholders has to be the necessary precondition to develop such solutions in green recovery with an emphasis on the sustainable development and environmental sustainability. That is totally properly mentioned by you, that the full-scale aggression of Russian Federation, which is ongoing for already 3 years, the war is ongoing for 11 years. It is the biggest war conflict in Europe during since the World War II, and the destroyed infrastructure and destroyed natural ecosystems are incredibly upscaled. We have already registered and documented. Can I see the presentation?
We've
already registered and documented more than 8,000 cases of environmental damage, and we assess, the expert assessments witness that we have 85 billion euro of losses, a huge sum of money, a huge damage. And substantial destroyed infrastructure. I do apologize for that. Okay, so substantial destroyed infrastructure leads to the colossal waste. The expert assessment tells us about more than 1 million tons of waste of the rubbles and debris. Those are mixed waste which are very dangerous. In particular, this is asbestos. And in this context, I would like to express the gratitude to our international partners who provide us with support in the management of dangerous components of the waste. That is UNEP and UNDP, who are working in these processes, including the World Bank as well. And we have expectations and hopes that, on the one hand, the huge scale of ruined infrastructure leads to such waste, but we can consider this waste, after its processing and sorting, as a huge resource just for green recovery of Ukraine. Creation of safe management system for these wastes is one of our first and foremost tasks. The aspects of radiation and nuclear safety. We all know about the occupation of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which has substantially increased the risks of radiation and nuclear disasters because the industrial platform has been transformed, in fact, into the military base and militarized. Everybody knows the consequences of the activity of the occupants in the exclusion zone of Chernobyl NPP, when in fact it was robbed and without a single hint on the compliance with the rules of radiation and nuclear safety, which can lead to potential dissemination of radionuclides beyond the exclusion zone. And the recent awful case of the 14th of February, when the drone directly attacked the new secure confinement. So we have the gap of the whole of 15 square meters and deformations on the area of 200 square meters. And in fact, these premises was burnt out. Thanks God we found assistance from our international partners, EBRD, and the representative of the President of France, Macron, have visited this site, and the new decisions are taken to recover this new safe confinement, to produce and to guarantee nuclear and radiation safety. Then we can also speak about chemical pollution of the environment. We can separate three components of this subtopic: the use of unconventional chemical substances by the aggressor at the front line, at the contact line, which directly impacts not only the armed forces of Ukraine, but the environment as well. And destroyed infrastructure, destruction of enterprises which belong to the chemical sphere of industry, with the release of an incredible amount of dangerous substances into the environment. As the consequence of the destruction of these types of infrastructure, we have a colossal pollution of environment. Some of the scientists already declare that even under such circumstances, in the situation of the use of poisonous substances and destruction of infrastructure with the release of chemical substances into the environment, in the situation when huge amounts and volumes of chemical pollution is taking place, can be compared with the damage which could be inflicted by the chemical weapon in Ukraine, with a certain impact onto the ecosystem, the health of the society, and the genetic fund of nation. When we speak about the destruction of Kakhovka hydro plant, we can say that definitely the hydroelectric power station, we can say that we lost almost 15 million of cubic meters of fresh water, which led to the destruction of the ecosystem and also some of the flooding, and it led to the release of bottom sediments, which are approximately 83,000 tons of solid metals. And of course, the impact onto the biodiversity, onto the natural reserve fund and natural ecosystems. Going on with the topic of the losses of the water resources, you can see the figures on the slide. Almost 800 of objects of the water system were destroyed. And according to the World Bank assessment, the infrastructure will need almost 8 billion euro to recover. In the context of forest resources, 850,000 hectares were occupied. As of now, 500,000 are still polluted with explosive devices. 77,000 of hectares have been demined. And again, the assessments of the experts of the World Bank witness that the damages of the forestry inflicted against the forestry is $28 billion. As for greenhouse gas, a colossal indicator, altogether it equals several regulated norms of European states. And recovering the infrastructure and the whole country, we are expecting more release and more emissions of 62 million tons. The long-term effect will influence also, will feel the influence of the war. And we're speaking not only about Ukraine, we can also speak about the European dimension, the global dimension. destruction of infrastructure, explosions, fires, and pollution, which I listed above, have trans-border context, and the polluting substances are moving beyond Ukraine. The pollution of the rivers and also the groundwaters and also the pollution of the Black Sea, perished ecosystems are not only about Ukrainian dimension, at least European one. What do we have to do? Recovery, recovery and recovery, transfers of technologies, the help and assistance from the international partners, the principles of build back better and build back greener. This will define the future of our country, which means the implementation of the natural-based technologies, the decrease of emissions and development of energy-efficient technologies. In this context, the integration into the EU, our Euro-integration aspirations and implementation of the standards of the European Union will have decisive meaning for the green recovery of Ukraine. And we need to base upon European Green Deal, and we need to achieve the sustainable development goals in this process of recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you rightfully described, the sources are diverse. There are so many different dimensions of the pollution that the war is causing, which has the risk of also having cumulative impacts, which requires integrated solutions, that requires engagement of different actors. So that's why I'd like to now ask Colonel Sitnik to tell us from his point of view how he sees the priorities, because since the opening remarks, especially this demining has been discussed also in the previous section, it is a crucial component that is affecting not only the humans, but also the ecosystems, the fauna also. So it is a hot topic, and it is a topic that needs to be addressed. So over to you, Colonel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Attila. Шановні учасники.
Dear participants of our panel, you know, my subordinates just wrote a very serious report for me. I don't know whether I should read it all. I will try to, because I'm sure that the questions raised in my report are very interesting. Still, the community would like to understand where we are developing into and what is our way. And the most important thing, what's the amount of work is awaiting for us, the amount of work connected with the recovery. So, in a nutshell, a huge amount of work, a huge amount of work. So I will try to list some of the points here, or maybe you would have better understanding after I list them. So, first of all, the Ministry of Defense welcomes the initiative of the Platform for Action on the Green Recovery and actively supports the implementation. It's important that this reason of recovery after the war wouldn't only cover the economic and social aspects, but include the integration of ecological principles which should provide the sustainable development of Ukraine. In this context, the role of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine is not only to provide the national security, but also in the support of the process of recovery of the environment, which should be secure, sustainable, and future-oriented. The departments of the defense forces are the first who have to repel the enemy and protect the motherland, including our nature. We need to save it as far as it's possible. The Ministry of Defense is taking measures to implement point 8 of the peace formula of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, in the Environmental Treaty of Ukraine. I do hope that you've read this document. Today we face a very important task, not only to recover the infrastructure at the places, but also to provide secure environment for our citizens, and the most important thing, for the future generations. One of the key aspects of this process is demining of the territories which have been affected by the combats. So, for the substantial understanding, There are two big components of demining. That is combat demining, which is taking place in the combat areas, and humanitarian demining, which has to cleanse the liberated areas from the explosive remnants of the war. These processes are involving a huge number of different structures, international ones and national operators of demining activity, and the units of the armed forces, professional sappers who are actively involved in this work.
Дякую, хто мені допомагає. Завдання Міністерства оборони в рамках зеленого відновлення полягає не тільки
So the task of the Ministry of Defense is not only the implementation of the getting rid of the environmental consequences, but the recultivation of the lands and provision of the sustainable use of the natural resources. Obviously, the volume of recultivation will be substantial. It's a very costly procedure. That is why I would be very cautious about that, because when we calculate all of that in cash, the figures are very high. In this course, we offer to consider in more details the following questions: the operational plan of measures on the implementation of 2024-2026 and the national strategy of demining activity till 2033. As you know, the strategy has also the approved operational plan. It has a certain list of measures which are being accomplished by different structures, state, non-state, and scientific research ones, and involving these measures. We would like also to involve the civil society, because our Ukrainian civil society is environmentally friendly and understands these issues so well, and sometimes raise those issues which some of the professionals cannot even see. So, if such help exists, the Ministry of Defense will express its gratitude to all of the NGOs. The adaptation of the international standards of demining, IMAS, according to the Ukrainian legislation. We've already transferred to the adaptation of the standards of IMAS 015. You know that those are IMAS standards which claim, formally speaking, in our legislation, they are recommended. Why do I pay attention to that? I will tell you later. To take into account the environmental component during the implementation of demining measures, and what's the most interesting, what you do with all of that when the territory is already demined, and the implementation of NATO standards. That is just the military topic. NATO standards on environmental safety in the military activity. The main standards of NATO are 6. There is a huge number of standards connected with the certain type of activity of the armed forces, connected with the weaponry, armaments, the medical provision, and other spheres of military activity, which, especially during the war, are very acute. So when we speak about the requirements of certain environmental NATO standards, we are speaking about these 6 standards. The war leaves after it not only ruins, but also dangerous legacy mines, armament, and unexploded ammunition, other devices, which can pose a serious threat to the lives of the people. It influences the agricultural production, makes the recovery complicated, and harms the environment. The armed aggression of Russian Federation against Ukraine has caused a substantial pollution of the territories by the explosive devices, which pose a serious threat for the environmental security. At this slide, you can see approximate what part of the territories of Ukraine is considered potentially polluted by the explosive remnants of war. As of the 2025, the area of potentially polluted areas by explosive devices and remnants of war is approximately 139,000 of square kilometers. Why do I say approximately? Because it's very approximate. Maybe 138 8,000 plus something, and among them 14,000 of square kilometers are the sea waters. Because of the density of the mined territories, in particular landscapes and arable lands, there is an issue raised about the time methods of demining works. In particular, there is a necessity to decrease the pollution with their explosive devices of the environment and efficient management of this process and these risks. The Ministry of Defense is actively cooperating with the stakeholders to provide the researchers of the impact of mechanized humanitarian demining onto the environment and defining the requirements on the protection of the environment during the measures of demining. We will welcome any involvement of everybody who is indifferent of any types of ownership. And we hope that still it may help us as soon as possible to adapt ourselves to the international requirements so that we, together with our international partners, could speak about these topics with the same language. The implementation of these initiatives will allow to decrease the negative impact onto the environment and help its recovery. With an objective to decrease the influence onto the environment through the measures of humanitarian demining, the Ministry of Defense organized the work on the adaptation of international standards of demining, IMS, according to the national legislation. Maybe you all know that we have a bit of discrepancies and differences. Sometimes those differences can critically influence the implementation of the works on demining. For instance, everybody knows that our international operators who are accomplishing different measures and international organizations have the compulsory documents in the list. For instance, the obligation which is called the ecological policy or the environmental policy. As of our state and non-state operators, according to our legislation, mostly they have recommendation character. And for us, recommendation is not obliging. So if we consider these issues substantially, still I think that these points have to be not recommendations, but compulsory for implementation, even if we need to amend the legislation at the level of the state. Then we need to conduct this type of work. Implementation of IMS 07.13 will give the opportunity to organize the process of land management with a special emphasis on the liberated territories and their further recovery for the use and management of potential ecological risks and minimization of damage to the environment during the demining measures, with an objective of the improvement of the quality check of the demined territories. The Ministry of Defense has created the unit which is checking the quality of demining. So for the quality of demining, we shouldn't only define the territories which were polluted with explosive devices, but we need to look at the dangerous substances and products of this activity is given to the local communities for the further use, taking into account that a huge number of such territories, in fact, are used by Ukraine. We are more of an agrarian country. So if we take into consideration that our southern and eastern regions are mostly agrarian, and if we don't consider the recovery of these lands, of arable lands, according to certain norms and criteria, then maybe it is possible to get in the future certain issues, certain problems. I don't think that it's that awful. This issue needs to be researched by the academia, but still we need to get the result when our products, formally speaking, will not comply the European norms and standards, and thus
how to put it better, it'll be complicated, like this process of implementation of these products will be complicated in the global and European markets. And in the area of humanitarian demining, the Ministry of Defense actively works to synchronize with the NATO regulations, which we plan to do during our military activities. In general, the activity of the army during the martial law, it creates enormous load on the environment. Of course, it goes without saying, but the armed forces is the institution, is the structure impacting the environment in the peaceful times as well. That's why for the military service members, we allocate the special military areas where military trainings take place in the peaceful times as well. And after the military actions finish, the army will continue getting trained, and all of that takes into account the fact that we have a dangerous enemy that has been dreaming for many decades to conquer the free people of Ukraine and get our land and soil. I think it's not a secret for anyone. The implementation of such standards, of course, in this slide you can dive deep in the standards, of course. It is a step to systematize the work on the environmental protection in the armed forces of Ukraine, in the army. Out of my experience, I can tell you that this is the long process. It's a difficult process to change the consciousness and thinking of our military service members related to the fact that any activity in peace times or war times and all the decisions, somehow they need to take into account the impact on the environment. Otherwise, we don't need any wars. We will just self-destruct and destroy ourselves, and that's a serious problem. When I had a chance to learn how the NATO countries or other countries impact the environment and work in this regard, well, almost all the military areas that I visited in the UK, Denmark, Sweden, and even neighboring Poland, everywhere in these military areas, there are people who work on the environmental plan in that military area, in that testing ground, and they comply with that regulation. If I say that in the Haderslovesterski testing military area, they do not plan any testing when the birds have their nesting period. Well, when I share this with our military service members, they look at me very skeptically and strangely. But I'm sure that we will change this mindset, we will shift it, because taking care of the environment, preserving the environment, guarantees safe future. In 2023-2025, the Ministry of Defense has built cooperation with basically very powerful international organizations like OSCE, United Nations Development Program, UNDP, UNEP, FAO, and of course, thanks to Pierre Karl, probably he's not here, thanks to Pierre, the Ministry of Defense started working with this international organization, FAO, in the area of the environmental research after demining. We are really thankful to all these organizations because one way or another they were engaged in the training processes. Our Excellence Center on Mining Activity and Environmental Safety has taken in 2023 and 2024, and this year we came back from Belgium, so we've taken a lot of big trainings where experienced international organizations, laboratories provided us with this type of support and provided these trainings where our specialists of the Ministry of Defense can cooperate on the high level with the experienced and very powerful laboratory world organizations. We want to thank everyone because the sponsors of all these events and trainings were the listed above organizations. Of course, there are some problematic issues where we need to take joint effort, not only as the governmental institutions, but also as the organizations of civil society. So what directions do we see in terms of the effort consolidation? Well, first of all, the evidence-based list of the identification of costs. Only in the defense objects, let me explain what it means. It's military objects which are in the logistics area, not those that are located at the contact line, but like these are the dislocation points of the military units all over Ukraine, even in the western parts of Ukraine. So my point is that as of today, we've calculated 363 billion hryvnias of damages only in terms of these objects. Well, in contrast to the numbers you heard earlier in this conference, it may seem like it's not a big amount of money, but this is the so-called contribution of the defense system objects into the total damages. So there are some military objects which are located on close to the natural reserves fund objects. During the rocket attacks and Shalin and drone attacks, of course, the environment suffers that is around these military units. And there are some military units which are located in the forests. And of course, with such Shalins and attacks, it's not just the ground that is contaminated, it's not just the soil that gets contaminated as a result of the damages, but also the natural reserves fund and the forests get destroyed. And also the identification of the scientific or evidence-based foundations for the environmental recovery of the territories that is which were affected by the war of Russia against Ukraine. Of course, that is something that we have to do because, like, these areas, they need to be recovered, be that during peaceful times or war times. We will work in this area, and we kindly ask everyone to provide necessary support, starting from evidence-based methodologies all the way up to the practical participation in terms of the elimination of the damages. Then the development of the methodological foundations to mitigate the environmental impact and the aftermath of the war. By the way, the Ministry of Defense has just started paying more attention to such things as climate change. Of course, we're also joining this process. I had a work meeting with the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources. We were speaking about the ozone destroying elements, and I think that we'll continue cooperation in this regard. Then the development, wait a minute, the creation of the International Scientific Technological Center of Environmental Researches to prevent and eliminate the aftermath of war. Well, that is a serious task that requires all of us to unite our effort, to join effort. This is the big picture which consists of different pieces of the puzzle. And of course, it would make sense to get together for all the professionals under one umbrella so that we would avoid the duplication of effort. You know what we need to pay attention to? Even in the last 2 years, We have so many organizations in Ukraine, and they are doing something, you know. But I'm sorry, one thing is just to say out loud about something, but it's not always working when you need to convey this idea to the community. So I'm not saying that only Ministry of Defense is doing something that's been already done that has some results, but nobody knows about these results. That's why we gotta be open, transparent in the communication, and we need to unite all the effort. It would be the great foundation to continue our work, to make it more successful, and to shift to the recovery phase after the military actions stop. Then, to recover the environmental areas which were damaged as a result of the activity of, as a result of the war. Of course, it goes without saying, and the support of the proposals in terms of the improvement of the legislation on the general green transition of the Army of Ukraine, and in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine we have the draft law, and unfortunately it is still in process, and probably it'll be worked on as a package of the increase of the control functions. The Ministry of Environmental Protection spoke about it before lunchtime, and as the Ministry of Defense, the Army will gladly join this work to be a part of this system. The Army of Ukraine, the armed forces of Ukraine have their very, very big impact on the environment, and I think that we need to take into account the capacity and the willingness of the Ministry of Defense that wants to be a part of this big team and jointly cooperate on the post-war recovery of Ukraine. I do believe that all of this would be a great priority in our joint activity.
Thank you. So, and last. Дякую за увагу.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation and also being open for cooperation with different actors. And as Ministry of Defense, looking at it not only from a security point of view, but fully supporting the recovery efforts. Thank you very much. I think the time has come to move to the academia. We have Professor Moisenko with us. So where does the academy stand in this picture, and what are the priorities from your perspective, please? Over to you.
Шановні колеги, безпечність
Colleagues,
довкілля
environmental safety is ensured by the ecosystem services which some biotopes provide to us. I mean forests, marshes, steppes, and so on. And in these ecosystems, biotopes, they make a difference in terms of the water provision, decarbonization, purification of water, soil, and other services which are important in the ecosystem. So green recovery of Ukraine has to preserve to maximum the natural ecosystems that we have, and even partly to be able to recover the damaged ecosystems. And it becomes truly relevant taking into account the war of Russia against Ukraine and that huge impact on our nature and environment. Of course, the war impacts not just the nature, but it also impacts anthropogenic environment. As of today, thousands of villages, cities, municipalities, infrastructure, objects, companies were destroyed. So, of course, all of that needs to be recovered. But we need to recover all of that so that the nature and environment wouldn't suffer during this process. So here are two risks. The first one is objective. It's related to the fact that for the recovery of all these anthropogenic objects, we will need to have more environmental resources, physically more environmental resources than Ukraine used in peaceful times. I mean, more wood, more sand, more stones, more water, and so on. And it goes without saying that we need to organize all these processes, the extraction of these additional tons of natural resources in a way that would not harm the nature. The second risk group is the subjective risks. It goes without saying that the businesses were damaged by the war, and right now we can see a lot of the different appeals to and requests to the government and lawmakers asking to simplify the access to the natural resources. In particular, we have so many cases where business projects, they are freed from the procedure of the environmental impact, and we have different draft laws in the agrarian area about the land consolidation. Probably in Ukraine we have the biggest fields in the world. Nevertheless, there are some draft laws. So if they come into action, we may lose even the hubs of biodiversity in the fields because that'll be in the way of the agrarians and farmers. Unfortunately, we have a very, very bad situation, in my opinion, that the draft law 12089 was signed on ensuring the rights of the miner with poor integrity. It means that the state has only 10 years to return the land which was not legally taken away from the state. And we have dozens or thousands of cases like that of such hectares, and it means that this land which was stolen during the ruling of Yanukovych, we cannot get it back because all these court processes and procedures are stopped, and it is so cynical. Despite all the appeals to the president, and the petition gained 25,000 voice, and like in the day when we speak about green recovery and we've managed to get together this big forum, the president signed this horrible law, which is a tragedy. So what needs to be done, in my opinion, to have the acting mechanism to ensure the natural recovery, environmental recovery during this process of recovery? We have to follow the tested pathways, the implementation of biotopic approach, let's say. This is the approach that's used by the EU, and it is implemented by the building of the network Nature 2000. It is named as the Emerald Network. And this ecosystem approach has proven to be effective on the example of the EU. Basically, in Ukraine, it has started to be implemented. Could you switch the slide, please? We've prepared the national catalog of biotopes of Ukraine and a list of monographic different publications. Here you have the national catalog of biotopes. Anna Kuzenko is the main chief editor and initiator of the creation of this catalog. To the right, well, here you can see the full list of biotopes present in Ukraine. On the third level, we have 216 biotopes. And to the right, you can see the book. And for each biotop, we've offered the full pool of ecosystem services provided by different biotopes. And it's really important because right now we know what ecosystem services are provided by each biotop, and then it's easier to estimate the value and calculate the costs. And this catalog was prepared in 2017, and we expected that the next stage would be the biotope mapping, because the catalog itself, it doesn't work. So we need to move on to the next stage, the biotope mapping. That is something that the EU has done, and it's proven to be effective. I mean, the final aim of the biotope mapping is to create the map where we would be able to see the biotope for each piece of land in Ukraine. When we open the cadastre and we can see who's the owner of the land, we need to understand what biotope that is. What will we get out of it? If we know the biotope, we will know the legal status of the preservation of this biotope. We will automatically understand the value of this biotope, and we can plan how to use this biotope in our activity, be that the natural reserve territory, or maybe this territory can be used for agriculture with high intensity. But unfortunately, the mapping of biotope wasn't done for some reason back then. Despite the fact that we requested many times, the ministry said that it's not the priority. And it is a horrible thing, because if we had this biotope mapping before the war, right now we wouldn't have the problems with the assessment of the damages. If we knew that this many hectares of this biotope area was damaged, or that biotope area was damaged, then again, if we had the biotope mapping done, we would be able to know, and we would be able to run the green recovery of Ukraine effectively. We would know how each piece of land can be used effectively in the future. But as of today, we don't have this confidence about the fact that maybe this recovery of Ukraine will destroy the forests, will dry marshes, and destroy other biotopes. So if we had this catalog, it would be way easier to control this process. And of course, this green recovery process would be much easier. It's important to say that we already have the experience of biotope mapping, but this mapping was not supported by the state. It was done not with the help of the support of the state, but it was mostly done with the support of the NGOs. For example, we mapped 10 national natural parks in the western Ukraine with the support of the Frankfurt zoological community. And right now we're working on the mapping of 6 national parks severely damaged by the war with the support of the charity organization Ecology and Human Rights. And we have this experience, but unfortunately it's just a drop in the ocean. And since this is the big-scale project, without the participation of the state and without probably the support of the international partners, community by itself can't deal with this challenge. On the other hand, during the lunchtime, we had a panel discussion where we spoke about green jobs, and I think that biotope mapping, which requires hundreds or even thousands of specialists, that actually may be the way to return from abroad the youth of Ukraine, which has some degree in the environmental field. And of course, we have the pool of specialists who worked on this mapping, and I do believe that in general, we don't even need to have any pilot projects. We can do the mapping right away. I'd like to say a few words about. Well, my first suggestion is that we have to do the biotope mapping. I've already said that we are running late in this process, but we cannot escape it. If we want to live in the civilized country, we have to do that. The earlier, the better. The second point is about data collection on the damages.
Оскільки зараз територія
Since right now, this territory is not governmentally controlled, or it is mined, or there are some military actions, so we cannot collect data from there. So right now we can focus on remote monitoring, and it would be great to have the center created which would accumulate the data from the remote researches. Of course, after the war is over and we have access to that territory, we will have to run the field monitoring, because we can't remotely monitor all the processes in the nature remotely. Of course, it's great that in January 2025, we approved the monitoring program. So we have the legal foundation finally to do that. But at the same time, we have to keep going forward, and we need to identify the subjects and objects of the monitoring, develop the material base, and prepare the specialists. And we need to implement the monitoring days. In a lot of European countries, there are monitoring days. And also one more point about mapping. This process also has to be stipulated by the legislation, because right now the Emerald Network and Convention is not in the law of Ukraine, because this law on Emerald Network hasn't been passed, and this mapping has there has to be the legal approximation and of these biotopes in the legislation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor. And as you described, following the tested pathways, ecosystem approaches, but most importantly, of course, providing scientific information, scientifically informing the decision-making processes in the recovery is crucial. And also in the previous session, they said there has to be professional biologists part of the recovery planning. So thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to leave the online interventions to last, if you allow me. So that's why I'd like to turn to Mr. Harri Pietarila from Finnish Meteorological Institute. I know you are having several air quality monitoring and that kind of projects also in the country, but from your perspective, what should be the priorities, pollution related towards green recovery in Ukraine? Over to you.
Thank you. I try to give some perspective on the question. So thank you for organizers inviting Finnish Meteorological Institute to this very important event. I would like to also thank personal Ministry of Environment of Ukraine giving me opportunity to collaborate with the Ukrainian environmental sector already from 2017. So there has been already a good cooperation in improving the science-based data for decision making already before the full-scale war started. Actually, we did achieve very good results already. Main part of the European directives related to air pollution was already transposed to the national legislation, and also the implementation of these directives were started. There has been a mentioning the Azovstal and Mariupol during this day several times. So actually, excellent results were achieved in Mariupol and the Donetsk region. So they started to modernize the air quality monitoring systems there to provide the better science-based information for decision-making, long-term action plans to decrease the air pollution in that region. Of course, that used to be the very industrialized region, Azovstal there in the Mariupol. Those stations provided good quality data for decision making. Of course, everything changed when the full-scale war started, February 22. All of this is vanished also, this pollution monitoring there, no information is available, and of course the pollution sources have been also destroyed. From the very beginning of the February 22, from the full scale of war, FMI also changed our cooperation. We started to assess the impact of war and air pollution here together with our colleagues and partners in Ukraine. Of course, because this in-situ measurement data wasn't available anymore, we had to rely on the satellite data to make the assessment. And that has been continued ever since, and we have a full data set available for these assessments, and we have provided and collaborated with the Ukrainian partners, and also at the same time trained over 100 Ukrainian experts to utilize this European Satellite Agency and Copernicus data for the assessment. In the previous session, we heard an excellent presentation by Sergei Sipchev, presenting some of those results on the forest fires and calculation of the CO2 greenhouse gas emissions contributed from the forest fires induced by the war activities. Basically, we have the same findings on the air pollution. If we think about the more severe impact of the war in the air pollution, like a direct impact of the war on the air pollution, that's the forest fires. It's not only the greenhouse gas emissions, it's also the air pollutant emissions. The most harmful air pollutant, of course, as you know very well, are the aerosols, the particulate matter. And that's a huge emissions directly coming from these unregulated forest fires due to the war. These acute concentration levels of the PM10, PM2.5, they exceed thousands of micrograms. It's not only the aerosols or the particulates, it's also the severe pollutions that are included in those aerosols because it's unregulated fires, so it's also these other substances within the particulates that are causing this health impact to the citizens and increased deaths because of that. We have also noticed a lot of different kind of impacts, not only these direct impacts on the war activities, on the air pollution, but there is also a lot of indirect impacts of the war. Of course, as I said, as you know very well, the Azovstal was not anymore working. Of course, that has reduced the pollution there. At the same time, there has been an internal immigration in Ukraine. Some of the cities in the western part of the Ukraine, the population have doubled. The traffic amounts have doubled, of course, increased pollution levels in those cities like Ivano-Frankivsk, for example. Also huge damages, as you know, to the energy system of the Ukraine. Leading also, of course, people have to warm the houses still, they have to make the food, so they are relying more on the small-scale wood burning. And that's maybe the most severe energy production for the air pollutant. So that is causing, for example, in the western part of the Ukraine, increased pollution levels because of the changes in the energy system and turning into small-scale wood burning. There is a lot of this kind of examples of indirect impacts of the war in the air pollution. Last summer, we started the new scale of our cooperation with the Finnish governmental funding. So we are, of course, putting our resources to have a better information on the impact of the war on the air pollution, but at the same time, we are building the future for Ukraine so that they can be in the air pollution management also in the future after the war in line, or before the war even partly in line with the EU requirements. So we are building not only this satellite information, but we are starting also implementing a better quality air quality monitoring system, this kind of big systems providing good quality data so that you can track the long-term trends of the air pollution and changes on the air pollution in the different parts of Ukraine. Of course, at the same time, we like to also implement this kind of smaller systems, sensor systems, and also sampling system that you can take sample nearby the front line to have also better information on the war impact there. We are also working on providing better information and forecast, for example, on the forest fires. We are implementing forecasting system that can also provide the forecast of the forest fire-induced aerosols to the pollutions, and the rescue operations can give also the warnings to the citizens. We are also working, of course, most importantly, how to use all of this science information in decision making. Of course, now in the wartime, what to do in this acute situation, but also in a longer term to use this integrated data to have a better information, what are truly the different pollution levels in different places, what are the contributing factors to the pollution. That's the only way that you can have a sound science-based information for the decision making. How you can implement the cost-efficient measures to improve the air quality in the short term and also in the long term perspective. This is basically the idea of the EU in the air quality management. Yeah, we are supporting and collaborating that here in Ukraine at the moment. Maybe on the forest fires, I would like to inform also that we are trying to also collaborate, or not only trying, but we are actually collaborating with the Ukraine also in mitigating the forest fire impacts. So we started in the beginning of 2020 with the Ukrainian Hydromet Center to enhance their capabilities to provide better weather, climate and early warning information for the rescue operations of Ukraine and also directly to the citizens. And now we are improving the information from Ukrainian Hydromet Center to the State Emergency Center of Ukraine so that they can use this information when they are planning this rescue operation. For example, when they are mitigating the forest fires, it's of course important so that these forest fires can be more efficiently put down. It's also very important for these firemen so that they also save the lives of those. These are heroic work that they are doing. So we don't want to. We try to avoid of losing those persons, and this weather information is actually very crucial for that. And of course, when we are mitigating these forest fires, we are at the same time also decreasing the air pollution and the greenhouse gas emissions induced to the forest fires. So this is in a way in a winning situation that you are mitigating different challenges at the moment at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is another multidimensional, in fact, issue to tackle with. But thanks to Finnish Meteorological Institute, you are providing expertise, building the capacity of Ukrainian experts and institutions, and also looking forward for future improved information gathering, data collection, and science-based decision making. Thank you for your presentation. Now I'd like to move to the online colleagues to talk about. I'd like to start with Alex Pires. But I'd like to ask him also at the end of his presentation to add one key message, because in the flow of our, let's say, session, we also have five already registered interventions from the audience. So I'd like to ask, after the two online presentations, also Mr. Antoni Pavelko to talk about a key message. I'm going to ask the panelists to share one key message that we could take to the plenary in our reporting. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you very much, Attila. It's a great honor to be here with you. Let me do just a tech check. Do you hear me? Do you see the presentation? Do you see me? I see a little bit not enough. Okay.
Presentation online.
Okay, good. So I will continue. I'd like to invite all of you now to reflect about the importance of investing in sustainable wastewater management.
Can you make it full screen? We are seeing your notes page.
Okay, so let me change here, swap display. Maybe now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Fantastic. So that's the invitation to think about sustainable wastewater management. It's a key element for the Ukrainian green recovery. And that requires all of us here to change a paradigm that many of us have, that wastewater, it's or a problem or a luxury to treat wastewater. Treating wastewater and considering it as a valuable resource, it's an integral part of solving the most pressing issues facing Ukrainian people in its recovery and reconstruction effort. And based on that, UNEP and UNEP DHI developed a draft assessment for the government of Ukraine on sustainable wastewater management as a pillar for reconstruction of Ukraine. That's in a process of conclusion now, that assessment, but through the process, more than 50 institutions were involved, including governmental authorities from national and local level, donor community, other UN agencies, financial international organizations, civil society organizations, NGO, and academia. Several of them are present here in this event. The assessment analyzed the current wastewater landscape in Ukraine, the needs for recovery and reconstruction, brought essential elements like population trends, looked at the pre-war context, analyzed water availability, climate change impacts, rural and urban service, war impact in Ukraine, wastewater infrastructure, and many other things, including alignment with regulatory frameworks for EU accession. This assessment also presented several case studies, including from Denmark, Austria, Poland, Romania. Currently, we are in the final stage of producing that assessment for the government. In the end of the presentation, I will leave you with the links and the QR code for the English and Ukrainian version of that draft assessment. But what for me is quite relevant are the key outcomes. So 7 strategic recommendations for action, and then a portfolio of 15 priority activities proposed by us and our partners to move from words to action. So what can be done within available resources, within the availability of resources to act. So just summarizing some key findings, sustainable wastewater management is essential to Ukrainians' quality of life. As Attila mentioned in the beginning, and it was mentioned in the opening event, everything is about quality of life, especially in building better Ukraine. Wastewater, it's a prerequisite for families to return safely to their homes. It's also a powerful tool in preventing diseases and a cost-effective way to ease the pressure on your health system. The recovery of ecosystems, rivers, lakes, and any water shore will depend on a good wastewater management in the post-war scenario. And of course, it's a requirement for Ukraine's path towards EU accession. Energy security, it's one of the main challenges that Ukraine faces now, and that we will continue to face after the war. And you might ask, what's the relation of wastewater and energy? Well, the potential of using wastewater as a decentralized energy source, it's already proved, and it can cover up of 20% of the demand for urban heating in Ukraine. That also reduces the vulnerability of long-range transmission line because energy, it's a recovery from the wastewater. And beyond heat, we can also recover from wastewater biogas or energy bricks that also contribute to an energy positive wastewater system and increase Ukraine's energy efficiency and resilience. But that goes beyond the two initial discussions and bring to us also that sustainable wastewater management can help to reduce resource scarcity and fight climate change. Let's bring the rationality for that. The recovery of nutrients from wastewater, especially nitrogen and phosphorus, can make available at local valuable fertilizers, reducing the dependence from external supplies, benefiting Ukrainian agriculture. Globally, the amount of nutrients and in the wastewater can offset 12% of the world demand of nutrients. Recycled wastewater, clean wastewater, can be used for irrigation, industries, and the recovery of freshwater and marine ecosystems, reducing water stress and increase water resilience in the country. And the wastewater is a very important greenhouse gas generator, untreated wastewater generate as much greenhouse gases as the whole aviation industry. Yeah? And that's becoming more and more evident that we need all countries, not only Ukraine, all countries has to work to reduce the emission of methane and nitrous oxide and other greenhouse gases through the recovery of that valuable products and then offset the greenhouse emissions. So sustainable wastewater management has several benefits, but what we are calling for action in that assessment for policymakers to prioritize wastewater management, reuse, and resource recovery in the political agenda. Nothing can be achieved without political will, and we hope that this forum today will help to bring that topic to the discussions and the policy decision arena. We also recommend Ukraine to strengthen the institutions responsible for implementing, monitoring, compliance, and enforcement of relevant policies. The role is critical in Ukraine build back better and greener effort. We also recommend to attract and sustain investment and finance to supporting the development and innovations in wastewater sector. The investment pays off. And also to foster opportunities for capacity building and learning across sectors and across borders, sharing local knowledge will favor the adoption of appropriate solutions. And now for the donor community, international governmental organizations, international financial organizations, NGO, it's very important to finance across sectors. Sectors properly increase resilience and sustainability. We have to support capacity building. Know-how promotes local ownership and sustainable impact. And we also suggest to facilitate collaboration between partners and the distribution of support through the creation of a database of current and planned projects and activities done by international organizations and other actors in Ukraine, so it can be well coordinated and increase that vision on wastewater. So we bring here for discussions with you our suggestions of next steps. And we put together that set of 15 initial services and products that we could deliver if we receive resources for that to support Ukraine on sustainable transition within its recovery and reconstruction. I will not go through detail to this table, but here is the list, and in the end you have access to the full document and the summary. But this brings a set of 15 activities that ranges from a webinar or webinars on relevant technical and regulatory topics that can deliver a medium level of impact that demands a very short time, very short effort, and very short cost, and it can be delivered by UNEP and its partners. But it can also include some more higher level, like feasibility studies, working and done hand in hand with Ukrainian authorities on local water reuse systems. That will take a little bit more of time, that will require more effort and also a little bit higher cost. Or it can be a very meaningful activity, like master plans for cities in the collection and wastewater recovery facilities. It's a very high impact, demands more time, needs more resources and efforts. But this is just an initial list. So we invite Ukrainian authorities and the donor community to review, refine, expand this list based on what better is needed to address the pressing needs of the country. The key message here in the end, Attila and the colleagues, is that UNEP and its partners stand ready, subject to the availability of resources, to support Ukraine become a global model on sustainable post-war recovery through innovative wastewater management. That was mentioned in the beginning by Mr. Marina, Ministry of Development of Communities and Territories, that the war could provide that opportunity for Spain, for Ukraine in build out back better. And the vision that we bring here is to deliver it through sustainable wastewater management, multiple benefits for Ukraine, people, environment, and for it to rebuild its very strong economy. Thank you very much. We will leave for a few moments the QR codes here, and we're gonna paste those QR codes and the links there in the chat. Thank you very much. Back to you, Attila.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks a lot for clear recommendations and actions, proposals, which will help us also in reporting. Thank you very much. I think we should quickly move to Mr. Anatoly Pavelko from the Bureau of Environmental Investigations, the leading legal advisor for his interventions. Thank you, Alex. Bye-bye.
Доброго дня.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anatoly Pabelko. I'm the representative of the Bureau of Environmental Investigations. The topic of my speech, a very short speech, as we are really out of schedule, will be the sustainable mineral use as the reason for environmental security of Ukraine. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that maybe it's very symbolic that today, when we are conducting this conversation and discussing the green recovery of Ukraine, I see such news that the President of Ukraine has signed the Law 1289, which people name a law about legalization of the stolen. Unfortunately, when the society and the scientists and international donors are trying to say how they can allocate their efforts so that Ukraine could be recovered, and this recovery could comply with certain green, sustainable development, justice, our authorities are conducting totally opposite things. But let me come back to the topic of my speech. Why mineral use? Why it is so important for us? I think that it's not a secret for anyone that in the national and international context, we have lots of discussions about Ukrainian minerals, Ukrainian subsoil use. And unfortunately, what we can hear today and what we can see today does not comply with the principles of green recovery and does not comply with the principles of sustainable development, which as of today is the part of the legislation of Ukraine as well. And because of that, I'd like to remind you Article 13 of the Constitution of Ukraine, which tells us that the minerals are owned by the Ukrainian people. They are not owned by some foreign states or interested groups, but of Ukrainian people. And again, because of the very steamy discussions developed around Ukrainian minerals and Ukrainian subsoil substances, I'd like to mention the following. Ukraine has joined the declaration in Rio de Janeiro about environment and development. This declaration has been joined by all of the main leading countries of the world. In this declaration, they've documented the principles which were selected by the civilized humankind, as the directions for their further development. Unfortunately, whatever was mentioned and whatever we hear is fully ignored by the in these, and everybody ignores these principles. Let me remind that in Principle 3 of Rio de Janeiro Declaration, they tell us about the right to satisfy the needs of the future generations. When we speak about Ukrainian resources, we need to say that the needs of Ukrainian future generations need to be considered when they sign any deals or amendments to the legislation which are about the Ukrainian minerals use, including the resources of subsoil. Then, Principle 5, cooperation of the states in fight against poverty as the necessary condition for sustainable development to overcome the gap between the different layers of society in different countries. We would really like to see the acts and documents which are signed so that they could consider this principle. We need to say that this gap in the level of life between Ukraine as the country which was affected by the aggression which is ongoing by Russian Federation and the level of the life of the countries we are cooperating with in the future should be equal. Then Principle 10, the participation of the citizens in the issues of environment. Any mineral use concerns the environment. And again, unfortunately, the messages which we can hear in the media today about the involvement of the security service of Ukraine, the people who publish information about some drafts of agreements which are planned to be awarded by our government, these steps at least are not compliant with the spirit of the Rio de Janeiro Declaration, and they limit directly or indirectly the right for the participation of the citizens in the decision-making in environmental sphere and mineral use. Then, Principle 23, a very interesting principle. Unfortunately, it's really relevant for Ukraine. It is that the environment and the mineral resources of the people under oppression and occupation need to be protected. As of today, 1/5 of the territory of Ukraine is occupied by Russian Federation. We would really like, and moreover, in our opinion, it is a compulsory condition that the principle that mineral resources, natural resources, which are now under occupation, which have been illegally used by the aggressor country, have to be protected, including in the international treaties, in the bilateral treaties, which Ukraine is signing and in the future will be signing about the mineral use. Because as of today, out of the information which we can see publicly, these points are never regulated and even never mentioned. Then, another point which I'd like to emphasize upon. This point is the following. As of today, according to the outcomes of our analysis, according to the outcome of the representatives of the ecology rights per human, the legislation in the mineral use in Ukraine contains corruption risks. Risks exist, in fact, at every stage, from getting permits for the development of minerals and fossils and licenses and other documents, up to the procedure of the assessment of the impact onto the environment and auctions. These weakened Ukrainian legislation will not help green recovery or sustainable development of Ukraine. And because of that, I would like to emphasize that under the conditions of the negotiations on the use of minerals in Ukraine, for the needs of our state and other stakeholders, we'd like to emphasize on the importance, on the compliance of the legislation of Ukraine with the standards, with the best standards of the countries with which we are together planning to conduct the activity in the sphere of the mineral use. In other case, otherwise, there is a threat. There is the threat that dirty technologies and also harmful practices of mineral use will come to Ukraine because of the lack of protection of our country by the local legislation and the system of the justice. And definitely it is a very substantial risk, which we need to get rid of before we have the activity about the development of our minerals. This activity, which is widely mentioned in the media and by the governmental officials in Ukraine.
And lastly, the key point, since you asked me to be concise, transparency. Unfortunately, as of today, the Ukraine, not the resources, they don't have enough transparency. And I'd like to remind you that when the International Environmental Organization, Ecology and Human Rights, they addressed and the decision was made that the Ukraine violated convention's provisions. In particular, it related to the texts of the agreements on the distribution of the products. As of today, the agreements which were announced by the government of Ukraine, they have all the signs of the agreements of the distribution of the products. As a result, I'd like to highlight that such important decisions as the minerals use of Ukraine and given the right to use the minerals and also providing the access to the minerals, it requires transparency, and we need to ensure the access for the citizens of Ukraine and for other stakeholders. We need to give them the access to the projects of such agreements. Otherwise, we end up in danger and we will face a lot of risks. Apart from the environmental risks, I would like to highlight that there are also social risks and legal risks. Legal risks are about the fact that we really wouldn't want Ukraine and all the activities which relate to Ukraine, so that we don't want them to be the topic of the discussion of different international organizations, and we don't want the results of the actions of our government to lead to the fact that Ukraine is considered to be the country that violates its own international responsibilities. And the words, the laws aren't the priorities right now. These are the words that you can hear in the country that is aggressor. Ukraine has to be the country with the rule of law and the rule of the laws. The second point is social risks. Please keep in mind that the mineral resources is the source which helps meet the needs of the next generations of Ukraine, and these generations and Ukrainians, they are very, very responsive towards any injustice towards them. In the times of war, in the times of the economic destruction, in the times of the significant destruction of economic and social potential of Ukraine as a result of the aggression of the Russian Federation, these questions will be highly sensitive, and they may dangerously lead to the social protests. And as a result of that, I would like to include 3 points. To ensure transparency, to ensure compliance with the legislation, and to ensure the sustainable development principles and all the legal actions that are related to the minerals of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation. Yes, I'm having a lot of pressure to move the group to the plenary, but there are 2 steps we haven't taken. One is the key messages. In fact, in the presentations, we heard quite a lot of messages. If there's anything missing, I'll give the word to the panelists. We have 4 registered interventions from the floor. Pier Carlo told me that each of them will have 20 seconds for intervention. So I'm looking for your understanding. But first, from the panelists, do you have any final key messages that you would like to share? Pier Carlo says no. Okay, I have in the list Mr. Denis Pavlovsky from UNDP. Yes.
Да, доброго дня, шановні колеги, доброго дня, шановні
Greetings,
учасники.
colleagues, greetings, participants. So good to see all the stakeholders here who are here. We work with you almost daily. After this presentation, I would like to make two key comments. The most important thing when we speak about green recovery, we speak about environment, safety, and the fact that UNDP is present in 8 regions of Ukraine and more than 8,000 objects were purified, cleaned, and we need to understand who will do this green recovery. What specialists will be responsible for the purification and who will be responsible for the recovery. And we're speaking about their health and safety. We're speaking about for the fact for whom we will rebuild and these houses so that people would live safely. And Mr. Samanet spoke about the danger of asbest and other elements which are dangerous, and asbest which can cover big territories as a result of the destructions, and UNDP pays attention to that so that the population would not be endangered with this negative impact. And the most important thing, how can we protect our environment from the waste in the context of the circular economy so that all this waste would be used as secondary materials in terms of their safety and chemical safety, because all of us understand that all these materials may include radiation components, heavy metals, and toxic elements which were freed as a result of the explosion. So we focus all our attention on that, and we want to thank for the support that is provided by the Ministry of the Environmental Protection and Ministry of Recovery, and we will keep on working to have the environment purified from the toxins, and so that we would decrease the load on our environment. Thank you. So I'm sorry, but 80 people are waiting for the next panel to start. They are waiting for you to finish. So I'm sorry, but it's time for you to finish. Please summarize everything and finish. So we need to go back to the main hall for the next panel discussion because 80 people are waiting for us there.
Looks like we are closing the session.